which is really interesting and fascinating. There's two things that are different about tonight's show. One is that I'm kicking it off, speaking instead of Chris, and the other is that we are right on time. And those two things have something in common. And the thing that's in common is that tonight, Chris is taking the helm, manning the controls, and that's why you can see on this scene he's moving around, probably trying to figure things out.
Yeah. First time through, right? It was pretty smooth, but as we are getting in the chat, I did have the mic off on this scene, and I thought I switched. So the first we got cut off at the beginning, but they can hear you now, Andy.
That's awesome. Well, here we are. Rich and I are in the scene. Chris is, running the controls, and that's cool. And Contrived X is here in the chat. I see Contrived X says, "If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you're fired." Well said. Well said. And also, I don't know how to pronounce this. Loka Samasada Sukino Bhavantu telling us we didn't have a mic, and we appreciate that. That's the kind of feedback we need. More often than not, we need that kind of help from everybody. Rich, how are you doing tonight?
Andy, I'm doing well. Happy to be here. It's a good evening. It was a beautiful day out there today. Had some nice warm weather, so I am in a good mood.
Yeah, and it's good to sort of have you on the stream, because last week we had Sam Basu on talking about Maui, and then you opted to sort of be off camera that night. And maybe even the week before that, were you off camera? I'm trying to remember. There's been a few shows lately where we haven't gotten to see your face.
Yeah, things have been a little busy. So yeah, it's been a few weeks I've been away.
Yeah, and but you've been helping. That's certainly for sure. And Chris, are you able to talk? Or are you manning?
Well, Good. I think last week, and we have to see when that video goes up, is Rich talked, he spoke at Philly.net. And, when that video gets up on YouTube, we'll be sure to promote it here. And so, after a couple hours of because it's a 2-hour presentation meeting at Philly.net, I can understand saying, like, guys, you guys have a great time. I'll push some buttons, but I am done speaking. I get it, So congratulations on that presentation. Hope it went okay. And can't wait to see it
thanks.
On YouTube.
Yeah, it was one of those that if I get to an hour, I thought I'd be good, and we ended up going the full 2 hours and having this stop questions. So it was a good session.
Wow. What were you talking about exactly on that?
Just talking about Azure for developers. So as a developer, it was a lot of fun. A lot of good questions from the audience, which was great. So a lot of interaction.
Well, that's cool. So tonight we're always a new topic on this show, right? We try to talk about a lot of different things. And, sometimes we do code samples, sometimes we do demos and have guests. Sometimes we talk about, topics. Tonight's one of those sort of like talking shows, I guess. It's called the Dev Talk Show. So tonight we wanted to talk about sort of like career paths, how we got to where we are. Maybe provide some insights for some people that are viewing. We would love to hear from people on the show if you happen to be here live. And some people are watching after the fact, later on YouTube. But some people are here watching with us live, and they can share some of their stories if they'd like in the chat, and we could try to engage them in the conversation. But, we were trying to figure out, how do we want to frame this? And we kind of left it a little bit up in the air between the three hosts. It was a little bit about like, let's talk about our first jobs. I wrote down a few sort of questions and topics we can talk about that I thought would be interesting. And then there was an interesting post on Twitter today from Allende. Is that how you say it? Oren, right?
Oren Aini, right? But he goes by...
I always say his name wrong.
And I may not have the names right, because I see him in print more than I maybe hear him on a show. So, but yeah, long time. One of the lead or creators of NHibernate, I think. Or at least he was certainly on the project. Wow, that takes me back. NHibernate.
Yeah, that goes back, right? So he had this. Let me see if I can find it here. So he had this tweet, Oren Aini, right? And he goes by Allende on Twitter. And I'm not throwing him under the bus here. I mean, this was all public, and it was, whatever we were just talking about. But he had a tweet today, and I responded to it. I was one of the people in the thread where he was saying that he did an interview with someone who didn't know what's it called? Object notation, big O notation.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And don't want to, we don't have to get into all the details of the tweet and all that, but what it made me think is, wow, interesting timing for this conversation, because not only can we talk about our first job, but maybe we start with, did we study computer science in college? Because the output of the tweet and all that stuff as well, big O notation, it tends to be one of those more like computer science degree kind of topics, right? And I remember, and I said, my comment was, well, I didn't go to school for that, so I don't really know Big O. I've heard of it, but I'm not really that familiar with it. I couldn't say much about it. So, I don't know. And Mike Shea is here on comments as well. He said we had an interesting, I should do this feature. Oh, well, we don't know. Let's find out if feature chat is working. Let's see. I can do this.
I actually just tested it there just to see.
Oh, you did test it. Okay, good. You put one up. See, that's okay. So I won't touch feature chat. I'll let you handle that. So did we want to talk about that? Like, so did you guys study computer science in school? I think Chris did, but I don't know.
Well, okay. So for me, I started in a computer science curriculum in college, but before that, my actual computer science training formally actually came in high school. I was super crazy fortunate that the high school I went to had a computer lab, and basically it was one period. It was a traveling computer science teacher who came for the first period of the day to my high school and then went to another one for a couple other periods and so on. And so she basically taught multiple classes at once in there. I'll never forget her. It was Miss Gigi Walker at Sonora High School, who, and I just feel like, you know what? Deserves all the credit for me being where I am today. Because as sophomores, we learned Turbo Pascal. As juniors, we learned C. And then as seniors, we learned data structures and algorithms. And we got ready for the AP test. That was the best part of the training for me. I went to college, and because in order to get a CS degree where I went, Cal Poly Pomona, you had to take 2 years of calculus. Well, I couldn't get out of quarter one. And after failing it a couple times, I kind of got nervous about getting kicked out of school. So I basically took classes that weren't engineering classes to keep my enrollment and keep on path, and eventually decided to change majors. So I do not have a computer science degree, but my first exposure to Big O notation was in that senior level high school data structures class. Am I good at Big O notation today? No. Did I have to pass a test on it for her class and for the AP exam? Yeah. But that was a long time ago.
Right. So a lot of good comments in the chat, by the way. Ross the Lip sharing the Imposter's Handbook, which that's Rob Connery's book, if I'm not mistaken, which is a cool resource. And I've actually been thinking about reading that one.
Yes,
I don't know if Ross the Lip, I'd be curious if you don't mind telling us if that's just a book you're familiar with, or did you actually read it and recommend it? I know we see a lot of these things around the web, and maybe we're just helping promote it, or did we actually read it and recommending it? I'd like to check it out because I think it would be helpful. I don't want to get into a whole conversation about Big O. I don't think that's the point of bringing this up.
Right.
You were saying what I really was wondering
versus informal training, right?
Right. Let me take a slight step back on that also. So for the people that learned Big O notation, did it help? Did it matter? Like, is it something that you used at work? And Chris, I guess I'm going back to you because you said you studied it. Yeah.
So here's what I think. I think that your average app developer job, the kind of things that we tend to talk about on this show, and you even see around the web, where you're building front ends, you're building back end, that it doesn't come into play. But I will tell you that I think we should pay attention more often to the theoretical performance of our code, because that's kind of what Big O gives you, right? Is here's the and I don't even want to say theoretically, is that this particular algorithm or loop is going to cost you. And I think that I'm guilty. We write the code not realizing that we're creating some kind of like O log n thing, which I can't even really explain to you on this program. I'm like, sort of, it's one of the things that I sort of get. My memory's fuzzy, and that it would be nice if we all kind of took that step and read a little bit about it. But day to day, depending, I mean, unless you're gonna like, for most people, I don't think it's part of the interview process and part of your day to day work. No.
Right. So, Rich, did you study computer science?
No, my background is completely different. It's sciences, but I was a biology major as an undergrad, and then master's in microbiology. So I'm totally on the sciencey side of things. And my first 10 years was actually spent on the business side of doing clinical trials. I didn't do or make the switch over to the technology side of things and writing code and doing development until about 10 years into my careers, basically.
That's interesting. I didn't know that you did that. Now, I didn't study computer science. I went to school and studied communication, and I have to say, we could talk about, how did those decisions that we made impact our careers, right?
Right.
Whether we chose to do computer science, did it impact our career? I think for a lot of people it does, right? I think I can safely say that my communication degree really helped my career. I took classes like public speaking, and I credit those often in my, I'm not saying I'm the greatest orator or whatever. That's not my point, but I'm comfortable doing so. And I don't have a fear. Like, we had to just get up in front of people and speak. And I think that that's a skill that got me a long way at the beginning of my career, especially, maybe even more so than now, where when younger people were less likely to want to stand up and speak. And so I think that it just is interesting. I feel that served me well. Now, I can't say what would have happened if I studied computer science. I probably would have failed, and then that would have been the end of that, right? So, yeah, and I'm just trying to keep track of some of these chat messages here, because there's a lot of chat going on.
Interaction in the chat. I'm so glad to have you.
Happily Harried.
Yeah. So I
new to the
posted
show,
their comment
possibly.
there. Yep.
Yeah. I was expected to discuss it during a recent interview. I was able to discuss and explain it effectively. Did not get the job. Oh, well, that's a shame. You were able to talk about it and didn't get the job. But I always say, by the way, often, it always seems bad when we don't get the job. And maybe that's some things we can talk about here. The jobs we didn't get, the interview, how that worked out for us. But the jobs we didn't get, in the long run, I think work out in our favor, because something else comes up and we make a different decision. And so I hope for happily there that works out well, as it has for me in the past when I didn't get jobs. Okay, so yeah, we didn't study. So let's talk about, maybe we should talk about first jobs. And I don't know, this is also sort of leaning into some stuff I'm doing at work a little bit, where we're working on our, I don't know what else to call it except our grid, what does it mean to be a junior and a mid-level and a senior and these kind of things, right? And so this kind of fits into that a little bit, because it's like, what was your first job and what kind of things were you doing and how did it help your career? Those, I think, are, or hurt your career. Right. Your first job in technology. Mine was not my first job. I didn't start computer programming until I was about 30, right? And Rich, sounded like you were something,
Yeah, it was something. Yeah, although, yeah, I think it was more my formal formal programming role was about 10 years in. But what was interesting was all along that was the opportunities to learn different types of programming, do different types of applications that gave me some experience that kind of opened the door to be able to jump into that technology role when it came up. So kind of being prepared for, what really is, the dream job or the thing you want to get into is kind of important, because when that opportunity hits, you got to be able to jump in and say you can do it.
So what was your first job in computer science or computers?
First job in computers was more, since I knew the business and I was coming from the clinical trial side of things, I moved over into a spot that was almost like a liaison between IT and the business, someone who could understand how the processes that business has to go through, and the data they need to collect to support. At the end of a clinical trial, you do all of the write-up and the documentation and the reports and the submission and the review of all of that data. So understanding that what they went through, it helped me when we were working with the vendors who were basically compiling all that data for us and putting it in their tables, doing SAS tables, and being able to have that conversation and go between to make sure that they were giving us what I knew the business teams were going to need in the end. So that was kind of my first real technical spot. It wasn't really programming, a little bit of SAS work, but not much.
Right.
But that was for me, that was part of my journey getting from the business to be able to get to do some of the really cool tech stuff that, we kind of get to do now.
Right. It was transitional for you, right? You're able to use that to sort of bridge in, maybe dip your feet in the water and see what kind of things are going on in a different department, what other people are doing. Now, I'm just curious, and Chris, maybe we'll jump over to you in a minute, but did you parlay that into your next more, I guess your next role maybe was more technical, if in what we would call technical, right? Was that within the same organization, or did you switch companies, or were you able to parlay that move?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I ended up switching, or taking that an opportunity that came up where we had one of the managers there, and he's looking across the bench, and I've got nobody to build this application, and in talking about it, so I kind of said, well, I've been playing around with some of the stuff on the side. This is a small app. I can probably figure it out. And he's like, he was kind of surprised that I, had gone that far down the technology path. So again, that opportunity kind of met up and like, hey, I'm going to jump in and do this. And, because I had done some learning and some training around it, I was able to kind of run with it. And it was a small app, but we were able to get it up and running. And it was one of those things that now opened the door to doing some of the dev work, which was pretty cool.
So it's interesting because I think we've heard stories like this before, right? And I don't know if people always believe the advice we give them when we say, like, be there for that opportunity when it comes around. Like, find a way to get in the door. And this doesn't have to apply to computer science. You want to be a vet or whatever, at a veterinary hospital, get that job in there somehow to learn about, working with animals or whatever the thing is that you want to do. Get in there somehow, because we are able to turn these things into the next step for us, right? I just think it's an important thing to remind people that those things happen. Chris, how about you? So what was your first, Chris is writing stuff. He's just giving up on us and he's putting it right in the chat. Why don't you save it for the conversation? Look at this guy. He's just like,
well, we kind of moved on from the college discussion, which we can come back to. But certainly, we're coming from a perspective that's it certainly isn't last week, right? So some younger folks who might be joining us, or maybe career-changing adults who are getting into a CS degree or an information systems degree, I was kind of just pointing out that that there were options then too, and so as far as my first job that I would consider a tech job, I there's kind of two that I would bring to the table tonight, but let's start with the very first one. I was incredibly fortunate. Yeah, go ahead. Before
you continue, Ross is saying that Ross the Lip is saying your mic's a little low. Now I hear it okay, but we're on Skype, so
okay.
If you could boost that up a little, and thank you.
Like when I'm talking here, okay, I see it is lower than everyone else's. So let me see if there's something I can do about that to help a little bit. It does look like it is a little bit lower than everyone else's. So in any case, for me, so I have kind of this unusual path where I was very fortunate. So again, you heard in high school, I'd already done some programming, right? And then I was in CS in college, but I was already in this place where I was looking at other possible majors and ended up being a political science major. So what ended up happening was I had a real good family friend whose dad was starting a business, and he knew that I had a programming background because of all the years that his son and I spent at his house writing GW Basic, and we would just mess around, right? So he said, hey, I want to talk to you about what I'm doing. And so he was starting a company that was called RX Laser. If you search around, you can still find a couple things about it. They've been acquired since. So imagine we're in the mid-90s, and at most corporations, your bills, your explanation of benefits, your paychecks are all being printed on dot matrix printers. And if you're a big enough operation, forklifts are required to bring pallets of paper to these industrial dot matrix printers. At the same time, the HP LaserJet was coming into its own. So this company said, hey, stop buying these pre-printed forms that are crushing you in cost and storage and whatever. Remember those font cartridges that plugged into LaserJet printers? We were programming those things so that basically what you would do is when you were sending your raw data down to a dot matrix printer and it would just fill in the blanks, we also snuck in the code to recreate your form along with it. So now you print on blank paper. And of course, huge time saver. It was a great process for, like, let's say you're doing a check run. And the classic thing that would happen in a check run is a check would get stuck. So now you got to take that check out. You got to send it to accounting so it can be voided. And then another, because these things are pre-printed with Micker and the Micker signature at the bottom, and they're all numbered. Well, with a pre-printed, with a blank electronics form, just print it again. Oh, the printer jammed on 1021, shred it up and print it again. So that was what we did. Now, why did I?
Right.
Yeah. So I came there because he said, hey, I think you understand some of what I'm doing. He wrote in BASIC, he wrote this language that you used. Remember Logo, the turtle, moving the turtle around? You use that kind of syntax to declare where on the page you wanted to put boxes and text and logos. And then we converted that to the HP PCL5 language. And he said, I've already written this kind of compiler, but I think you could help me work on it because I got to go out and sell this thing. So I worked for him part-time while I was in college. Like, who had that job? Right? And
then how did you parlay that into your next move then?
Well, I worked there for 5 years while I was going through college. I used it to put myself through college. The paychecks I got from him paid for Cal Poly. And then what happened was, and while I was there, we grew. We started doing other things. So I got back into C and C++. I picked up MFC to do some Windows programming. That's how I got into the Windows platform.
Right.
And then what happened was, after 5 years there, I got my degree, was thinking about going to law school. And then another friend, so this is something I want to talk about later. Another friend introduced me to a Disney Imagineer who was leaving Disney to go help start a company for a product that he helped put into Disney called Disneyland Forever. And he said, I think you would really enjoy this. I think you should work here. So I wrote a resume that wasn't untruthful, but I really parlayed that, oh yeah, I've got some MFC experience and Windows, and I did some C, but and then I got hired there. And so now I have my second programming job. And I've always told people, once you've got your second one on the resume, now the future employers say, okay, this person wasn't just hired once on a lark. They were hired again. And that was it. I stayed there 5 years. Now you got 10 years experience. And I'm not trying to jump ahead of this conversation. But what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of luck here in how I didn't end up going to law school. So,
right. It's interesting you talk about, 2 jobs at 5 years. I think one of the big topics that people often talk about with this kind of stuff is, should you change jobs? Should you change, and how does that affect you, right? So I was wondering, maybe that's a topic we can talk about a little bit, is about duration. Rich, did you, your first job, did you stay there a while, or, do you, I don't know, what advice do you have for people? How about that in terms of, sticking around, staying out the job, or maybe bouncing around?
I mean, there are so many different, thoughts I've had on different jobs I've had where I've, stayed and left. Or I think as long as you feel you're being able to do something that's up to your potential, that you've got opportunities for growth. There's always, a good reason to stick around somewhere and not just jump at another opportunity that could be very similar to what you're doing. I mean, unless it's, unless it's move up. I stayed, I mean, I'll be honest, I stayed first, and organization. I jumped around to different roles within the organization, but I probably spent the first 5 years at one company, then 10 years, and then another 5 years. And the only reason I left that third one was because they basically packed up their operations and moved up to northern New Jersey, and I wasn't going to basically relocate. So, I'm more of a longevity kind of person than jumping around, although I did do that for some consulting stuff for a bit too. So.
That's interesting. So as you were saying that, I actually brought up my LinkedIn profile because I couldn't remember the jobs I had and like how long I was at some of my positions. So the first job I had was about 4 years. First job in technology, 4 years, then 3 years, then 1 year. But that says 1 year, 2 months. I thought it was longer than that. They went out. They got bought or whatever. It was a startup that ended. So that was the shortest one. Then I did some contract work for a while. Then 3 years, and then does that bring me to now where I'm at like going on 9 years? And it's interesting because I will say that often the best, it's really interesting. You say like stay around. I think this is the good advice that I heard from you is as long as you're getting good opportunities, it's fine to stick around, right? But I found that my career took really good leaps when I was able to parlay something I learned at one job that I probably didn't know all that well, but I got a chance to learn something new at one job, right? This is how my career really started to move along, right? A couple of jobs that were fine, and then one job where I was lucky enough where they said, yeah, you can play with that new thing. And I worked on that new thing, and now I had experience that other people didn't have. And I was able to jump that to the next job and get like a bump up and like, all right. And then since I was already doing new things, I was able to do the next new thing. You know what I mean? Right. And then I was able to parlay that a few times into now I've got more knowledge than other people. And it's kind of luck though. Like I'm not saying I did anything special. I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to have a boss at one of those jobs who was willing to say, yeah, go ahead and try that new thing. And so it's interesting because while in some of those places I could have stayed because I was doing interesting things, I took the chance on some of those to parlay that into more progress and sort of build up like more knowledge and stuff. But I tended to leave when I was not doing as much interesting things. To me, that was always I like to do something that's interesting, and I didn't want to just stick around. But I had some long jobs. Now I've been at my job for, like I said, going on 9 years. It's the longest job I've ever had. And I'm perfectly happy there. It's just interesting to see how things have changed. Chris, what do you think about the moving around or staying put theory? And again, we don't want to say too much if your boss is listening that you're thinking about, leaving. We're not trying to get anyone in trouble here, right?
No, absolutely. And I think that's why when we even talked about having this show, I made a joke that I think the statute of limitations has probably expired on our first jobs. So I feel fine talking about RX Laser and Digital on Demand out in California, which I'm actually not sure. I'm not sure that they're still around because this is a while ago. So note that for each of the first two, in fact, it turns out that it's going to be the first three. I was there 5 years, each one. Right. Which as that was happening, there were plenty of folks that I worked with at the second and third job, career developers, who was like, they would say things like this. The only way to get a big raise is to change jobs. The only way to get a promotion is to change jobs. Maybe not necessarily true. Like we've been through a lot of change in our industry. The .com bubble came and went, and the web's come and gone, will come and stayed for us. So why was I so loyal? Well, the first job I was loyal because it was putting me through college. The second job I was more loyal because I suffered a very long time from an imposter syndrome that without a degree, I'm not going to get another job. I think that the web started to break that barrier down again, but I think I would be curious what you two think. I do believe that in the 90s, there was a period of time where kind of pre-web, pre-internet, where you were not just jumping into this industry without a background. It wasn't like, oh, wow, you made a website. Great. You're hired. You did some Flash. Come on in, right? That happened in the early 2000s where there weren't web developers. There was no college churning them out. So you could do it. You were in. I didn't have that confidence in that first 10 years of my career. So I stayed loyal to build a longevity because I wanted that feeling that like, yeah, see, I've done it 15 years. Like you trust this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say that I didn't change jobs. The first job I had, I stayed for a while and would have stayed at longer, but it's kind of interesting. It goes to a question I saw in chat from Richard Wysocki, who's on YouTube, asking, were we honest with our boss when we wanted new opportunities? Yeah, that's why I left that first job, and we were begging for new opportunities. So friends and I alike were just begging for like, please, we want to try to do this or we want to try to do that. And we weren't in control of our destiny. We were consultants, and they would put us on the contract that came up, regardless of what we wanted to do or whatever. So I think that was frustrating to people. And that's where I feel like it's a good idea to take things in your own hands. And I said I just have to go along, and then things started working out, in different ways. But it's it's interesting to think about like your longevity at different jobs. And I could see why you stayed at that one job for 5 years. Well, they were putting you through school and stuff like that. It's great, and it's good to be loyal. And but I think it's a two-way street. Companies should be loyal to their employees as well, and provide good opportunities for them, which is hard. I recognize that now as I'm, lean so far into management now. We can't always provide the opportunities that people want. It gets a little tricky, But
do you think it's just you run out of space on the org chart? Is that it, or is not quite that?
I don't think it's so much space on the org chart. Well, there's two kinds of opportunities, right? There's an opportunity of growth in not literal growth, but that like title growth, like you're moving up in the org chart.
Okay.
And that wasn't always what drove me. When I talk about moving to other companies for opportunities to grow, it wasn't really necessarily that job title thing. It was more that technology. I wanted to like learn more. I wanted to like consume the stuff and really like take in as much as I could. And so the two kinds of opportunities are, yes, promotion is an opportunity, but the opportunity to work on the kind of technology that you want to work on. Let's say you want to be a web developer, but as a matter of fact, this is what happened with me. I wanted to be a web developer, but I was on ETL, database, data warehouse projects and things like that, which would have been a great career move if I was interested in that, actually, because it was paying a lot back in those days. I could have made a killing, but I just wasn't into it. That wasn't the thing I wanted to do. And so when I say I jumped after opportunities, it was to build up my skill set so that what I wanted to do is be able to have control over my destiny. I wanted to be able to like own my career. And so it was important for me to learn a lot of stuff and be good at it. So I don't know if it was, and so you were asked back to me, I guess, is it because we run out of space? I don't think that's generally the problem, that we run out of space on the org chart sometimes, but it's a pyramid and it tends to thin out as you get up. And so I don't know, I haven't had that problem, but more likely we have the problem where people say, hey, I'd like to be that person who switches from data warehouse to web development or from web development to data warehouse. And employers have to say, but we have a team that does that already. Like I don't have the spot for you. Or, how about, we could talk about modern tech. I want to use Blazor. Well, we don't have any apps that we're starting from scratch right now that we could put in Blazor, something like that. And I hear a lot about that. And I remember being younger in my career and asking those questions and getting that sort of answer back. Well, we'd like to help you out, Andy. We think you'd be great at that, but we don't have that opportunity. So that's what I mean, Chris.
Yeah, no, I understand. I just, was just asking is because we've had a couple of people ask, there's already been the conversation in chat about and I'm paraphrasing a couple folks who've said it, is the move from developer growth is the move to management. And I do think that's a little bit of a cliche or a trope. We say it, and I'm trying to avoid it because I believe pretty strongly in the Peter principle, and I don't know that I don't know that that might be the level where I'm promoted to incompetence, where
Yeah.
I mean the managing of the company side of it. It's funny that I
Right.
say that, right? Having been like a senior patrol leader in scouts and being pretty successful at that. So I'm not sure that it's not being a leader of people, but maybe not wanting to do, I don't know. I may change my mind someday. Like there's still
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, when you talk about that's an interesting point as we talk about this whole management sort of like path. You want to stay technical or management. That does go back to what you were talking about, I think, about the room on the org chart. We only have so many positions for those senior people.
Yeah.
And it's hard to figure out that role of how do we take people up that technical track without being a manager if you don't want to be. I sort of threw in the towel somewhat, like I've drifted way off. I mean, I have a lot of technical responsibility still in my job, but I don't write. I did write I actually wrote code last week and unit tests and did pull requests and had a code review, right? So I'm still doing the right thing. But I got to write some code last week, and I was really excited about that. It doesn't happen as often as I would like. So yeah, I don't know. Just trying to catch up with the chat.
Oh yeah, it's been
Percent.
fantastic. I feel like we don't want to miss some of the things. Like it says here, have you been honest when you wanted new opportunities and they didn't give it to you? We did post that link that we posted that question a little bit earlier. I think for me personally, I've been pretty fortunate to not have to hit that wall prematurely. I really do feel that way. There's only been 1 or 2 times where I said, hey, I think I'm going to take this opportunity because it can't be offered here. And that doesn't necessarily, and in some cases I looked back later and said, wow, what a mistake. That happens. But I do understand that is something a lot of people face, is saying, I'm not sure that I can move up here. I'm not sure I'm going to be given the opportunity. And sometimes there's just nowhere to move, or you can't move into the technology you're interested in. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's just a culture problem or an employee, you got to find somewhere else that'll accept you.
Right.
Something I don't know the three of us have to face, which is why I'm always very cautious to say, look, I'm not going to, I will admit that yes, a lot of that self-preparation that I did when I was tooling around as a kid, staying up all weekend writing Press Your Luck in Turbo Pascal or something because I thought it was fun. Yes, that led me to a point where I could take a job. But why didn't they go get a computer science graduate? Well, because I knew somebody. And I think I recognize that I have been given a lot of boosts by a lot of people. And I just ask that everyone here, if you're in that position, do that for the next person, the next generation, and especially people that aren't like you and maybe don't look like you and are different culturally, so that you can bring them into your team and learn from them. And always remember you're learning from them. And that's something that I've kept in my heart for 20 plus years now, is that I feel fortunate to be in this industry and where I'm at. I feel lucky and just, gosh, like just falling into a pit of success without realizing that I was going to get asked to join a company here or a team there. And like, you're asking me, and I would have happily, like, wow, especially when I did that Disney project, which we haven't talked about. Maybe someday we'll talk about fun. What is your another great show idea would be like, what's your signature project that you worked on? Like, we have a chef's signature dish, right? I mean, I was asked to come work on a project that was going to be at Disneyland. You didn't have to ask me. I mean, if I would have known that project existed, I probably would have been knocking down the door. So
you had me at hello, kind of thing, right?
So I just implore everyone here, when you get a little seniority in this industry, be a mentor, help that next person, and don't worry so much if they don't have that computer science degree, right? Or they don't have that exact education you're looking for.
You know, I want to play upon some things you said, and maybe we can flip it back to Rich for some thoughts on this topic too here. But the thought I was thinking about when you were saying that, I'm like you. I tend to be really thankful for the positions and the growth I've had in my career. And I often think of myself as very lucky, right? And there's definitely luck that goes into these things. There's no question about it. You know, sometimes you just have to be in the right place at the right time. But don't sell yourself short, Chris, because you had to do something in those positions that people recognized in you, right? And I really want to point out that that's maybe some advice that we can give people also is take those extra steps there. Be the person who's enthusiastic. Be the person that's hungry for knowledge, and find a way to stand out and show that, you know, you're ready for the next opportunity, and show things and learn things on your own. Because I'm sure that's what you do, Chris, because I know you, right? So I don't want to I don't want to take away the luck part of it, where we have some luck, but I also want to encourage people to, you have to make these things happen for yourselves, right? I don't know, Rich, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you have you have to invest in yourself. You have to make sure that you have, the right set of chops. I think part of that for me came from the background of not being a CS degree person, and, essentially working alongside, not everybody, but there were certainly enough of those of my colleagues who had that kind of a degree. So I wanted to continually prove that I needed that I deserved to be there, essentially. So yeah, I think there's, and when you do that, that gets recognized, and that's where the opportunities come out. So yeah, I think there's definitely definitely a good bit to being prepared and being ready to answer the call when it comes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be ready to answer the call when it comes. Right. That's the thing. Right. Another thing I was thinking about is, here's a place where I got well, I was going to say I got lucky, right? I was going to say I was fortunate that my first job, which I didn't talk much about, right? My first job in computers was a consulting job, right? And some of you guys may have had consulting jobs, but I worked for a company, and their job wasn't my choice. They'd say, for the next 6 months, you're working in this company, right? And for the next year, you're going to be on this job over in this thing, right? And there were things about that I did not like. On the flip side, one of the things that prepared me for and helped me very much is I got used to walking in the door being the new person, right? Here you go, Andy. You're going off to this new gig. There's 5 consultants there. They've been there for a year, and we're putting you on that project now. And then, a year later, we're rolling you onto another project, whatever it is, right? And what's interesting is that later in my career, when I was ready to move on for a job, or maybe had to move on for a job for whatever reason, right? I was okay with walking in the door to a new company. And I kind of prided myself on that as a skill that I said, hey, and what I found that did is it freed me up a little bit. A lot of times people were worried in their career, like, well, what would happen if my company, I love this job, what would happen if this company went under, or something like that. And I had to find a new job. And I would always say, well, sure, I understand it. Sometimes it's hard to find a new job, and I don't want to discredit the job market aspect of this. But the fear of a new job wasn't the part that held me back. Like, I was able to be free about that, and feel good about that. And I found that was an interesting benefit of a job that maybe people don't consider. And I was wondering, do you guys have any similar stories about something a skill that you got because of one of your previous jobs that maybe helped you in a way, on your career, that wasn't exactly just the well, I learned how to do Link when I was on that job, or something like that, but some other kind of tale.
Yeah. And you don't necessarily mean tech.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's a skill around having to go. I mean, you came into this naturally, Andy, in your background being that, you're a communications major and you had the opportunity to present and do public speaking. For me, that was never, part of my background, or, for the first, practically almost 8, 9, 10 years into my career, it was something I never really did. But as I started to pick up that skill through speaking at meetings, speaking at presentations, coming to the user group and speaking there, even that kind of a skill is something that has really changed, what I can do and the type of opportunities that I'm able to jump into, even for the role that I'm currently in now, where I spend, a good portion of my day, kind of leading the group and doing that kind of public speaking piece, and consulting wound into that as well. So I think for me, it's been that ability to present and have a good public speaking presence that is, a non-technical skill that I picked up that's been invaluable in what I do.
Totally. I mean, and you use that, and you're so good. I've actually, and I've
Thanks.
sat with Rich, by the way, like at his job. Like I've been in and had him be the I don't know what you call it, even like, the teaching a group of people from a company that come in, and he provides information. And you're so good at that. Like I've seen you at your job, where like I don't think you guys have ever came into my office and like watched me do my thing, right?
Right.
You're so good at that skill. Your whole demeanor and presence and everything, and the way you handle those things, it's something you're really good at. And so you're lucky that you're able to play upon that, I'm looking at the chat, by the way, Chris, and I don't know if you're like,
yeah,
I realize I am way beyond like the chat has gone by so fast.
Right.
I don't know. There's
it's
conversations
been great
happening in there. And how awesome is that? Yeah. How awesome is that?
Yeah.
How about this though? You talked about public speaking, and maybe Chris, I'll throw it back to you on this one, but if there's something I really need to credit to my career, if we want to talk about what made our careers like pop and happen, I'd have to say it's hands down my involvement in Philly.net, and thank Bill Wolf for the work he did over the years and keeping that organization running and giving me an opportunity to, hey, Bill, maybe in a month, would I be able to do a talk? And he'd say, sure, Andy, whatever, right? And I did that. And talk about making opportunities happen. I mean, from the time I started doing that so this is interesting on a couple of ways, right? I started getting job offers regularly. People would just come up because I spoke from time to time, and people would just come up and say, Andy, we got to get you in. Now, these weren't real job offers, like they obviously, right? I would have had to have interviewed and stuff like that. But Andy, why don't you come along here? Come, we got a job at our company. You could have that job, something like that, right? Now, what that did something very interesting for me. Okay. I hope it didn't make me, cocky or conceited, right? Because I actually had a terrible case of imposter syndrome and didn't think I deserved any of that, and probably didn't really deserve any of those kind of accolades to say, come work here, come work here. But here's what it did for me. It gave me the confidence to take chances at work. It gave me the confidence to stand up for the principles I wanted to follow in software. And I could feel like, hey, I'm going to push this company a little bit. I don't mean being a jerk, right? But I mean like give those pushes and think, hey, if this doesn't work out, I guess I have other opportunities. Right now, I didn't often take those. I really didn't switch that often. But it gave me that confidence. It like freed me. It wasn't even confidence. It was that free feeling that I said, I can take risks in my career because I have a backup plan, right? Chris, you've been involved in Philly.net. Do you feel that was helpful for your career?
I think that and this is really simplifying it. So I want to make sure I caution everybody that I'm oversimplifying. But if I were to create a chart of when I got involved with Philly.net and after, the graph starts shooting upwards. And it's because at first it was because of community. The fact that you're with other people who wanted to learn and hang out and really dive into something, that helped, because I was just an audience member for the first couple years. And then I kind of just got brave and said, I think I'm going to talk about something I don't see anyone else talking about. And that was XNA and building games at the time. And then when that sort of fizzled, I took a stab at something else nobody else was talking about at the time, and that was SignalR. And then next thing you know, you get noticed by folks who work for Microsoft, right? And that's where things start to change. And it's not even just because they work for Microsoft, just even people in the community. Because I will tell you, this is a little nerve-wracking, but you become the presumed expert on these things. I can tell you that a job that I got directly came from the graphics and games work that I was presenting at Philly.net, because that led a couple of people to say, well, hey, here's somebody who understands game programming principles. You're not a game company, but they might be willing. You should talk to him. And I did work there for a little while.
Right.
And then, so it's actually a little scary that people start to think like, oh, wow, you must know everything about that. And it's like, well, no, I did a presentation.
Yeah. If you hired me, you'd find out that that hour that you got from me was pretty much what I had.
Yeah. Now you know what I know.
Now you know what I know. Right. Exactly. But I think the part of the lesson here is, this is something I try to tell people, is own your career. It's yours. And you have to do things to make it happen, right? Like whether that means finding opportunities at work or, meeting other people and things like that. If you really want to have the career, if you really want your career to move, you have to own it somehow. Do anything you can to own it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I like this point here, that the other things that have all been interested in, okay, because I'm paraphrasing what Mike Shea is saying. And for those of you who might be listening just purely on audio, he says, I was a ski instructor and cycling coach for most of my adult life. I think that has helped me work with others at the technical level to find interesting ways to explain things. And so much of our job is about finding a way to break things down, not just for your technical colleagues. It might be for, heck, I don't know, executive leadership, right? You trying to put it in terms where they can make a business decision based on the metaphor you use or the way you decide to break down a choice.
Totally.
A tech, something.
I think it's good. Now, I want to go to a question that we got here.
Yeah.
But before I go to that question, I feel like I always say, let's do a quick commercial here. Not to scare anybody away, but let's remind people, hopefully you're here. If you're here live, we're on Twitch. We're actually streaming live on YouTube, and we've got some people watching us in both places. And we love the comments and questions and things like that. And we love that everyone's involved. If you're, and we're also, shows are all archived on our YouTube channel.
Yep.
Which is Dev Talk Show.
Yep.
Not the Dev, sorry, youtube.com/the Dev Talk Show. And we're here Wednesday nights at 8:30. And we hope you'll subscribe and like and comment and tweet about us and do anything you can to help grow our show and be a part of our conversations. Anything else you guys want to add on that commercial? And then I'll go to the question.
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching this in the future, let us know in the comments what you think about this episode on YouTube. If you like it, hit the like button. And even if you don't want this kind of episode, just hitting that button too lets us know what kind of episodes you want to see. We try to respond to comments. Sometimes I'll admit that, and I think all three of us are trying to hit them in YouTube, but I might let a week go by and go, oh man, I got to go check on the YouTube comments. So we definitely want that conversation to continue, whether you're watching us live right now, or if you're watching us in the future on YouTube. And then if you are watching us in the future, let us know what the weather's like in April, May, June in 2022. Let us know what things are like, coming up. So we're looking forward to that.
Cool. Yes. That's awesome. Hey, so I was thinking about this question. I saw this question from, I guess it's Danstan or Donstan Kamuli.
Right. I love this.
And they say, I appreciate you sharing the knowledge. How was it with your approach in getting and passing your first interview? So I will say, for me, the hard part is I can talk about some interviews. I can't remember my first interview, unfortunately, but I think I can talk about interviews. And I've also been on the other side of a lot of interviews and can probably talk about how other people pass their interviews, right? But do you guys remember your first interview or can share any knowledge on that?
Yeah.
Rich.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rich.
So when we say first or like first in tech, right? Because they're a little bit different, and
Well,
you
that's
have different
true. Yeah.
experiences you're going to bring into those as well.
Yeah,
Um,
that's probably first in tech, right?
Yeah, I'll skip the United Artist interview to take tickets for Jurassic Park, um, which
well,
was
a
which was
little
actually
further past
fun, by
that,
the
right?
way. I mean, I have fond memories
First
of
in
that
tech.
job,
Thank you,
but
Dan
but
Stan,
certainly
Singer.
I think we're being a little dry, maybe too dry
Yeah, we're
humor
kidding
there.
around.
So yeah, I can't wait to
So,
talk about this. Go ahead.
Rich, I thought you were going to
Oh
talk about
yeah,
your
so
first tech, or
yeah, so I think there wasn't anything I think special around first in tech, given that it was kind of a bridge role, like being that liaison role. So for me, it was more talking about the experiences I bring it over from that. But I think just in general, any interview, and I've been trying to pass um, this my thoughts around interviews, to my daughter as well, who's starting to interview for internships as she gets ready to finish up. Interviewing, I think, if you can tell a story, and it's not just, oh, I did that, or there was this experience here, where, tell me about an experience when you did this. Just relaying it is okay. If you can build it into a story and make it relatable and memorable, I think that storytelling aspect of interview is goes a long way to really helping make a connection with the person you're interviewing with, and being able to make yourself memorable to them.
that's good advice. Um, I was thinking that. Well, I was trying to think back to what probably happened in my first interview. My first interview, I was coming in from a job in a totally different career where I had done some software. I actually was dabbling in. I wanted to get into software programming, and I was using Microsoft Access, and I wrote an application there. And at the time,
I'm
I kind of
sorry.
knew I wanted to move. Yeah, I
You
wrote a
said,
full application in Access. It was actually pretty robust, and
"Oh
I
no,
could talk about
I
some.
meant I was sorry." That's
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Um, and I basically I built this application. I spent 6 months building this application for my current job, and then now I started to interview for technology jobs. And one thing I do remember is just being honest, right? And when they say, well, when they ask me questions about things I didn't know, I'm sorry, I don't know that. However, try to turn it into an opportunity. Wow, but that sounds like something I'd really like to learn, or I've heard about that, and I've heard that that's a great solution to do something, and try to show a little knowledge on things, but don't shy away from things you don't know, right? Just show interest in the fact that you think, wow, you could turn it around and go, just goes to show how many things there are for me to learn, and I'm so excited to take the things that I do know and turn them into, things that I can help this other company with, things like that. And so, being honest, but being, enthusiastic and passionate. What about you, Chris? You got any tips from
Yeah.
there?
So I think I want to preface this by saying you heard my story early on. So the first two jobs, the interviews were not the hardcore hitting, we don't even know who you are interview. So I'm going to leap ahead to when I first had to have that kind of interview where really, I don't know, I'm coming into a place, I don't know anybody. So there is no like, hey, we think you should come work for us. That you don't have that chip to play ready to go. Um, Unfortunately, what that does mean is that I already am showing up with a resume with 10 years experience. So this is a bad, not the best perspective here for somebody coming straight out of their first training or schooling, or maybe a coding boot camp or something. But I really want to reiterate what Rich said is telling stories, being able to tell a story about what you did. And even better, if you can prepare to think about how it helped the business. I mean, wow. It's one thing to be able to demonstrate your technical knowledge. It's another thing if you can kind of demonstrate a little bit of like being a lay MBA, and be able to, even if you don't know the dollar value of the business value you created or preserved, that's okay. but can you at least demonstrate that as part of your story, you're showing that what you did was create business value or preserve business value. You had the business objectives in mind and you met those goals. And that's a very different thing from tasks on a sprint board. I'm talking about like what we accomplished here allowed us to move forward in this way. It made customers happy in that way. So, for example, I was telling you about my second job, the Disneyland Forever attraction. Part of the spin-off of that was these little machines that they used to sit at every Barnes & Noble in the United States, where you could grab a CD off the shelf and scan it, and it would immediately start playing music in your headphones. And sometimes when I tell this story, somebody says, "Oh my gosh, I use those." So, CD, what's a CD, right? I'm already dating myself for some of the younger folks. But when I went for that first job, that first tech job where I was I was applying, they didn't know who I was, I told that story. I told the story about the time on Disneyland and Main Street at 4 a.m., the tools that we used to ensure that the install would work so that the annual pass holders lined up to get the Pirates of the Caribbean special CD that we were going to print for them, that it would work, and all the time and effort we put into the lab, that the decisions I made, because I did own this project, to ensure that we weren't going to get there and run into gremlins. I'd done run-throughs so many times. And the same thing for Barnes & Noble. And now here was the thing. I didn't realize until later when one of the interviewers who I became friends with at the job told me, he said, "You were talking about companies like Disney and Barnes & Noble. And you know what we all said? If you can make them happy, then we're not worried at all." I didn't even actually realize the value. I'll be honest with you, I didn't realize the value in those names. I wasn't trying to name drop. I was just telling the story.
You know what I heard, though, when you were saying that? I wasn't hearing Disney necessarily. I mean, I was, right? But I wasn't hearing Disney, and I wasn't hearing necessarily the value you added, even though you talked about the value you added, right? What I was hearing was you cared about the product you were making, right? And I would think as a hiring manager, or, I'm thinking, do I want to hire somebody who just kind of slogs through and writes good code, or do I want to hire somebody that cares? Because when they care about the experience that person got from listening to that music or whatever that was that you provided, right?
Right.
Then you care about their experience. You're going to be careful, right? You're going to check for errors. You're going to do the due diligence. All those things that you want a software developer to do, because you had stake in it, like you took ownership of it, right? And that's what I heard in that story,
Sure,
right?
okay.
And I think it's an interesting, slightly different outcome, but both of those work out well. I mean, I agree with what you said about showing value in the things you did. Like there's a lot to that, but there's a second side of it that you might not even realized.
Right.
What those people were hearing
Yeah.
from you was your passion, that you cared, right? Because and that's probably, I was trying to think about, well, it's been a while since I've been, on a first interview. But when I interview people, or when you guys interview people, what is it that you're looking for in them, right? And I would say that some level of passion, some level of that they care about their job, like that they're not looking for a job. Remember what I said earlier? You got to take ownership of your career, right? You got to make things happen. There's a difference between a job and a career, I think. I mean, it's a subtle, in my mind, someone who takes their career into their hands is thinking about their craft, right? And being better at being software developers. As a job, it's like, yeah, I got the job. I'll work there for a couple of years and then maybe I'll move on or what, So passion. And the other thing, and I think this goes back to what Rich is talking about with the story, communication skills. Communication skills are probably more important than being a good software developer at the job. I mean, maybe I'm being, flippant. It's easy to just say something like that. Like, oh, yeah, right. Well, I mean, obviously you have to be a decent developer, right? You can't have total disaster. But I think if a tip for people going into their first interview is be a good communicator. And how do you do that? Maybe practice the interview, right? I used to do practice. That's something I did. I did practice interviews. I remember doing that, where friends, I'd say like, come on, just interview me. Just let me get used to saying these things out loud. Let me work on my story, like work on my, like what Rich was talking about, turning it into a story.
Yeah. And and
yeah.
just to clarify, it's not just one story. It's,
well,
you've got a bag of, a collection of stories, a group of short stories, right? And pulling out the right short story to answer the question, and, and having enough so that if something comes around that you would have used that story before, you can, be able to talk about something a little bit different. So I think it's, it's having responses to those questions, and having responses to those questions, but just being able to tell them in story fashion, is kind of what I was thinking. But
yeah, if people have any other tips, this would be great stuff to put in the comments. But if you have a simple tip that you want to share about, like, interviewing, whether it's first interview, second interview, whatever, you could be doing interviews your whole life, but you might still have tips. There's always things we can learn when we go on our next interview, tips that we can have. And yeah, don't be desperate. Richard Wysocki says, yeah, don't be desperate, right? You don't want to do that. Yeah. But you have to be able to engage and show something. I don't know how to put it into words all the time, but I think that that's such an important skill.
Yeah. And that's, oops, sorry.
No, please.
You were saying, you were talking about someone who's passionate about what they're doing, and that's one of the things when when I interview somebody, it's and I don't do it all that much anymore, but it's kind of, how does that come across, not only in what you have to do for work? I will ask, well, are there other technical projects, or what things do you kind of work on technology wise that aren't necessarily for what you do in your day job? Because those kind of experiences are the things that you are interested in and want to devote your time to around technology, or around doing something that you're, obviously have some kind of level of passion about. And I think those kind of things are kind of important to the conversation, and understanding kind of where they're coming from. Now, everybody has all different kinds of hobbies. This for us is a hobby. So, I think even some of those kind of hobbies is important too, because it's something you're passionate about and you follow through on. I think those are important parts of understanding who the person is, and, are they a good fit for the role and the thing that they're working into.
I see somebody put up on featured chat, Richard Wysocki's comment about interviewing. Talk about something you're learning, but make sure you know a little bit about it so you're growing. And I think that's a pretty good one, right? I've been the interviewer where people have dropped in things like, hey, Andy, what do you know about, I'll just use Blazor because it's the new thing. Andy, Blazor sounds pretty cool, right? Or whatever, like they're throwing it in, they're dropping it in there. And I go, well, yeah, Blazor sounds great. What do you think about it? And they're like, well, I don't know. I heard about it, but I don't really know anything about it. I don't know if you're helping your case, right? You just sort of showed there's more stuff you don't know. But how about you say, oh, Blazor just seems like a really great opportunity. Haven't used it yet, but the chance to do C# on the client, or whatever, like, I think that's what Richard is getting at. And I think that is a really good thing. And it shows that you're sort of dialed in a little bit. Let's see, what is it, Mike Shea? Would you be willing to take a pay cut to work with technology or on a project you are extremely interested in? Well, I've actually done that. I've taken pay cuts. I've also, I would say, and I was actually going to talk about this as a broader topic about like how we made certain decisions to take certain jobs, like what was the deciding factor. My current job, which again, I've been here for a while, I had two opportunities. And at the time, and one was offering me probably $15,000 more than the other one, which was a significant amount of money. To be clear, right? It still is a significant amount of money. And I chose the one that was offering me the less money. Now, talk about being fortunate, right? I had to be in a position where I could make that choice, right? So I was already had a decent salary. I mean, if it was like a you know, in the early parts of your career, so it's pretty hard to turn that stuff down, right? But
Yeah.
the point is, I made the decision based on the opportunity that seemed like the best opportunity for me, right? And quite frankly, the one of the biggest negatives for the other job was work-life balance. It's, you know, it just seemed like it was going to be really like hard job from that kind of perspective, working late a lot and things like that, which, you know, it can be great. But I was like at the point where I had young kids and I was like, I want to be home. And so I was able to make that kind of choice. Um, and so, you know, that sort of goes along with like the pay cut thing, but like, you know, how do we make the decisions, right? Or you know, did you guys have any decisions that you made that were similar to that?
Yeah, I can think of a couple times where, I mean, I specifically have either wanted to work with something, or maybe I said, hey, I want to try that kind of role.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always the right decision, or, you know, I don't know if that's even a fair statement. It might have just been like, maybe it wasn't the right time, or maybe it just didn't work out, or maybe it did work out, and then another great opportunity came, and you know, so sometimes it's the people though. Sometimes it's the people that are asking or saying, hey, come join us, and you know you enjoy working with them, and you know that just the fact that they're there means that there must be challenges ahead, because you kind of know this isn't the kind of person who just, you know, wants to go to work and come home. Like, they clearly want to solve a problem. And I know I'm being kind of generic, because I think we talked earlier about the statute of limitations, right? And some of these are a little bit more recent, but the reality is a lot of times it is the people. And so a theme that I keep going back to when we talk about because is that many of the career choices I've made have been because you know, I've known somebody who's either asked me to interview, or I've kind of said like, hey, you know, what do you think about me joining there? And that's a far cry from just finding a rec on a job site, or maybe finding their careers page and going in kind of blind. I think that's a very different thing. It doesn't mean I haven't done the latter. We've talked about that. But it's a very different experience when you are coming in on someone's recommendation.
Oh, yeah, you have that feeling that you don't want to let them down, right?
Oh,
Am I going to embarrass
sure.
that person? That's a tough one. I find it sometimes harder to go in when you know someone at a company and you're going to go work with them and you think, geez, not only am I going to embarrass myself and this whole company is going to find out that I really am not as good as they might think I am, but this person I know personally is going to like see that side of me. I was trying to remember on the question about taking a pay cut, and I don't know, it wasn't coming to me right away, but my first job in technology. So talk about this, right? Would you be willing, Mike Shea asks, you know, would you be willing to take a pay cut to work with a technology or a project you were extremely interested in? Well, when I changed careers, and this was a big deal, I took a $20,000 pay drop. Remember, I'd been working you know, I was 30, so I was, years into a career now. You know, like I had moved up, and I went to take a basically entry-level job in computers to do that. So it's a little different than maybe the question, the way it's being asked, to work on a technology or a project that I'm interested in, but to work in technology, which I was really interested in, like just to get into the field. And you know, that was a bold move. It was risky, very risky for me. It was not a simple decision. It was not at the simple, oh, I've got money saved up. No, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? You know, like I got to figure out how to save some money. Like this is risky. But I did do it. And I think it worked out pretty well for me. And I think a lot of people have stories like that. Well, I went to work at a startup. They didn't have any money, but I took a risk. And those things work out pretty well. But it can be hard. You know, it can be hard. You know, OD1233 says, I find it difficult to assess in a technical interview what is okay not knowing. I think what is okay not knowing and what, well, I think it's like, you know, how much, you know, is it okay to not know, right? I think is, you know, what's it okay, right, as a candidate, right? Any of you guys have any thoughts on that? No? I mean, so...
Yeah, a couple. I mean,
ahead, Chris.
Okay.
I think this is a hard question to answer because so I'm going to give you the weasel part of it first, and then maybe I'll try and give you some advice. Not every interviewer is the same. Not every company, there's no standard for interviewing. Some companies will make you run a gauntlet. Others will have a gentle conversation with you, which also means they might make a bad hire too. I'm not trying to defend that second way of saying like, oh, we just had a nice conversation. I think you're a nice person. You ought to join. Well, what if they're not technically able to help? That could end up being a mistake. But at the same time, other places make you run a gauntlet, right? So it really, and unfortunately, the interviewers, you're a gatekeeper. When I have been asked to give my technical opinion about a candidate, I'm standing there. I can say no. And that might be the end of it, because how else is the business supposed to decide? I'm the expert, supposedly, right? I'm the one interviewing. So I would take it. I would be careful to not judge yourself too harshly if you feel like, wow, I really thought I was ready and I knew a lot. Certainly try to understand the technology that you think you're going to have to use based on the rec, based on the job description. At the same time, it's okay to own things that maybe you are only familiar with or don't know. And look, if they're not okay with that, it might not be a place you want to work anyway. It sounds like kind of a tough culture. And also don't expect to check off every box, because that person is usually a unicorn. That person probably doesn't exist. And that advice goes for anyone who's ever looked at a job description and said, oh gosh, I don't check all the boxes. I'd better not apply. Go ahead and challenge yourself.
Advice, by the way.
Go ahead and challenge
really
yourself. Yeah, because that person probably doesn't exist, and you might hold yourself back by not going ahead and taking it. We even know that those are personality types in people that if we don't write our job requisitions correctly, we might be excluding people who would have been perfect, but they will say to themselves like, oh, well, wait, I didn't check every box. So we have to do a better job of recruiting. That's the technical side. Don't forget that as a candidate, you're interviewing them. Do your best to land somewhere where you're not going to feel awful. But I do acknowledge that's easy for me to say when you have a job, right? If you need a job, there's some desperation that can kick in. I acknowledge that and I respect it. So again, it's a call to all of you as interviewers. Treat them as a person. Think about the stories. I actually try to, if I think somebody maybe isn't doing so well on the technical part of it, I'll try to tease a story out of them, because that might be where they demonstrate the technical expertise.
Maybe it's just nerves or something.
Sure. I've had a bad day. Oh my gosh, I've had horrible days. I can tell you, I probably don't even remember the question. I've been given the technical interview, get on the whiteboard, get on the computer, and sometimes I've done okay, and other times I've just completely lost. I mean, I'm gone. I was lost. So talking about a tip for that interviewer, I'm going to think about another job I went to where I was going in. I say that I'm going in like I don't know them. I'm trying to differentiate that from when somebody asked me to come work there. And I did a little bit of research about what they were about. And in this day and age, work on your GitHub profile. Put things that you're working on up there. I will tell you about this interview where I went in, and the interviewer told me it was a multi-team interview. So I talked to a few people, and then I talked to a few other people. And during one of the stages, one of the interviewers said to me, "Hey, I found your blog." I mean, chrisgomez.com at the time. Right now it's down, but so I found your blog, and I thought, and the thing about it is you were talking about Signal R. And so I was on your GitHub page and I saw your Signal R sample, and I actually really liked your code. I liked that you took the time to separate the responsibilities. You didn't have interfaces because it was JavaScript, but it looked like you were really trying to separate the responsibilities. Can you tell me more about that? Now, look, I knew I was in good shape because he started off complimenting me. right?
Right.
Like, I really liked your code. So I said, oh, wow, good. And then let me go ahead and give him feedback on exactly what he said, because it turned out he was right. But heck, even if he was wrong and I hadn't thought about it, I probably would have tried to drill in a little bit. Like, yeah, let's go into that. And I can tell you for the rest of the interview, he even said to me at one point when he was giving me the coding interview, he said, I know this will be real easy for you. Now, that actually made me feel a little pressure, like, wow, I'd better do well. But but the funny thing about his coding test is he wanted me, the point of the test was to take this problem and to separate it into some interfaces. That's what he wanted to see. And it was like, he was already thinking in his head, like, oh, you already show that you like to think about separating out concerns. So like, he was past it. So I guess if I could come back, get away from the story and get back to the point, it is okay to put your best work forward on GitHub and go ahead and projects you're passionate about, because you know what? You'll be able to open up and talk about them. Somebody might go looking for it, especially in this day and age. Or if you're proud of it, put it right on your resume. And then it can become a conversation point in the interview. Like, hey, did you check out my GitHub profile? Here's something that I worked on, right?
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah, I agree.
Good to have those kind of things that you can, like, you talk about your passion projects and the things you're interested in about now. But, just to go back to, the original question about, when is it okay to not know something? Listen, OD 1233, I just want to, give you this, like, we've all been in interviews where we didn't know certain things. And when is it okay to not know something? It's always okay to not know something, because you just don't know it. Like, you can't change that. I mean, you can go out and learn it. Right. And you could let me tell you, there's plenty of times when I went on a job interview that maybe I didn't get. And I said, well, I guess I got to go learn that thing because I didn't have a good answer on that. Right. And don't get me wrong, I studied up. Oh, my God. I remember trying to memorize, what are the 3 properties of object oriented programming? Like, just make sure you know these answers. Like, sure, I get that. But then if you don't know it, it's okay. It has to be okay, because you don't know it. There's nothing else you can do about it except, be polite and don't worry about it. And like Chris said, half the time, I don't expect people to know all the answers, right? One thing I try to do as an interview is help people to find the answer. Like, sometimes I think people know something, but they don't know maybe what it's called. Like, there's that word, like, and I might, whatever that, I don't know what it is, but I'll be like, well, so do you ever use code in such a way, and you describe it, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I do that. I don't know, it's probably not a real example, but if I said, do you know generics? And they say, no. I go, well, did you ever do that, in C#? Do you ever have, like, angle brackets with T in the middle? Oh yeah, sure. I'm not an expert with that, but we use that at work. Aha, so you do know a little bit about you. Now let's talk about that more, like, help people. And I think a good interviewer is going to help you and really find out what you know, even if you maybe don't have the answer to the question right off the bat, and, like, help you work through it. Look at all this stuff in the chat.
Oh, I know, it's
Holy
great.
moly.
There's some great questions
Chops
here.
is talking, contrived. There's a lot going on. Oh, I know. So what's this? There's a question from Ariel, I guess, from YouTube.
Yes.
How do we get our application seen by a human recruiter? Any tips for getting past the applicant tracking system when applying for jobs online? I think that's pretty good, right? And then it also says specifically for scarce junior roles that automatically weed out those without the credentials, degree, skills, et cetera, right? Those junior jobs I'm sure they are even harder to get now than they were before, because there's just so many things that people are expected to learn. And juniors don't always have those things, right? So I don't know. How do we get by those? Anybody have thoughts on, either in the chat or you guys, Chris, tips on getting those applications seen?
That is so hard, because we just talked about not checking every box, right?
Right.
Right.
Well, I guess the best you can do is have more terminology on your resume. Now, that doesn't mean lie, right? But that means, how much stuff can you be reading about? how much stuff can you do a side project on? I've always given people credit. You talked about, side projects. So if you're looking for somebody with, let's talk about Blazor again. I don't know why, but whatever, Blazor or JavaScript. At work, I don't do any JavaScript, but boy, everybody's looking for that when they're hiring. I'm going to do some side project on JavaScript, and then I'm going to put it on my resume as knowledge experience, right? And so I've got JavaScript experience right now. I could talk about it, and I might not be able to tie it back to one of my official roles, but I can talk about it. And I'm not going to say, oh, I did that at work. I'm going to say, yeah, well, let me tell you what I did with JavaScript. For the past 3 months, I've been taking this course and I built this website, and I'm going to even show you the link to it. And you can see the JavaScript I wrote or something like that. But you can make it a skill that you have. But I think Ariel's right that a lot of those systems are really just scanning for keywords. And so if you don't have that keyword, you're not getting it there. So my advice, again, as I'm trying to summarize it, is find a way to have those keywords as best as you can. You can't have all of them, but you can add a couple that way. And I hope that helps.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that these kind of screeners, if they want 3 years, it's going to try and figure out if you have 3 years and if you of the particular keywords, right? I'm not sure how smart they are, but does it actually say, well, it looks like this. It looks like you had this job for 2 years, so that's not 3. And then, but if I add that one and the other one, then I'm seeing the keyword. I do not know if they're that smart. I think that they probably do want to see that you're saying the skills, but it's an unfortunate way to hire people. And I did see. I don't know what you think about the advice from Eagle Code.
I love it.
Did you like that, where it says another trick?
I think it's valid.
Might be to apply to smaller companies that don't have hundreds of applicants for a single position. Just reading it for folks who might be listening. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that a smaller company, like I don't think I've ever worked at a company. I don't know, because HR might have those systems, but I don't think we do. But most of the companies I work for don't have those tracking systems where they're scanning the resumes for words and stuff like that, because I'm working at smaller companies. And so I really do think that's a valid thing, because a lot of companies, if you go for the big job, well, I guess the flip side of that is it's those big companies that often hire a lot of junior developers, right? Because they need a bigger workforce. So it's a little bit of maybe a catch-22 there, but I do think that that's fair advice. That smaller companies don't often have those. They don't have hundreds of applicants, and they don't have those tracking systems, I think. How about that advice at the end there from a name I can't say, Loka Samasta Sukinu Bhavantu, right? Hello world in every programming language. I mean, I guess you get it on your resume that way, right? But that's a good one,
I agreed with what Richard Wysocki was saying. If their junior roles they're being realistic with a lot of stuff, and it's just like it doesn't seem to stop. It doesn't seem to stop them, because we know that those recs exist. I understand the point about networking from Mike Shea, right? We've talked about community already. Gosh, I hate for it to be the golden hammer. It feels like, wow, community, everything seems like that solves the problem.
No, I think you're right, though.
But I do think that, look, I walked into the Philly.net community and met folks like you and others, and guess what? People do hire other people in those communities. Now, they've become virtual right now. I do think being in person does help. Boy, there's a plea to go back to in person, right? Is the networking and finding people that you want to work with and that you want to hire.
The flip side of going in person, I'm sorry, I just have to jump in here because you're talking about how important it is to do in-person networking. The flip side is when you're virtual, when you're online, when you're on Twitch, what happens? You get raided. And so we just got raided by, it looks like a whole bunch of people. I don't know if the tooling is supposed to tell me this, because it probably says somewhere how many people we got raided with.
Cyber insecurity.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Cyber insecurity. Thanks for the raid. Wow. we are here talking about, we're not super technical tonight. We're not doing code and code samples and code demos like we often do. But tonight we're talking about, getting your first job or the careers, the paths our careers have taken. And we're answering questions and providing advice for people at various stages of the thing. And we're just kind of having fun with this.
Yep.
And it's so great that people are here to join in on this conversation.
So thanks for that huge raid. That's super awesome. And if the folks who've been here, make sure you go check out Cyber Insecurity's channel. But it's clearly we have a lot more of them hear us. So thank you for being here.
130.
And we're here every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time on Twitch. And all of our shows are recorded, and you can see them on our YouTube channel. You can get there either by video.thedevtalkshow.com or just go to youtube.com/thedevtalkshow, and we talk about all kinds of things. So, hey, thank you for being here. And, I have a lot of sympathy for Ariel because she's saying, that Ariel is saying, I didn't mean that at all. Ariel is saying that projects on the resume, and I think CTR must mean like maybe less than 5%, like being considered, I suppose. That's tough.
I didn't know that phrase. I saw that.
I'm not sure what it means.
It must have something to do with the count of words or something like that, or something like that on the resume,
That's just tough, right? Because
yeah, but you were saying about community, right? And so that's a differentiator. I can never say that word, a differentiator. When you sit next to somebody, and back when we're in person, and we all can't wait till we get back in person, go to the meeting, and here's one of the tips I tell people is don't sit next to your friend. Sit next to a different person each time, right? And have a couple of copies of your resume, and you're just always prepared, and you're talking about the person next to you. And how often have they said, oh yeah, we're hiring somebody at work, but we're only looking for a junior developer, and you might be like, well, hey, I'm a junior, and I might not have all the skills you're looking for, but here's what I do know, right? And you've got that conversation. They might say, well, I'm not the hiring manager, but I will put in a good word for you. You seem like a good candidate. You're here on a Wednesday night or wherever you are on a time. I've done that many times for people that I didn't really know, and I'm just like, well, they're trying, they're out there and they're doing things. And I know it's hard when we're virtual, but I do think, you have to try to do what you can, right? And just be in as many places as you can be to be in the right place at the right time.
So like Ariel's saying is click-through rate, set up tracking, but way ahead of me thinking about that. That's awesome. But so I agree that it's not for everyone. It sounds super easy to give the advice like, hey, go to things and network. For some people that's hard just because of who they are, and for other people it's hard because unfortunately you can be put in a vulnerable position, having to talk to a lot of people and just run into maybe not the best actor. It's a fact. And that's why I think some people have said we've got to fix the hiring process so that someone doesn't feel like they have to just to give you an example, you wouldn't want somebody to feel like they have to be able to have a drink at an after party of some kind just to hang out and talk about tech, and you can come up with dozens of other scenarios where somebody just might feel like, I don't want to put myself in that situation because of X, Y, and Z that are real concerns. And so we have to do a better job of not forcing people into that. It's easy for me to say, because I loved going to things and meeting people, it's easy for me to say that that's a great way, right?
Yeah.
Easy for me to say. I just want to acknowledge that because Andy, you're absolutely right. Community is wonderful. You've always been a big fan of community. I don't want to take anything away from that, but I want to acknowledge that we need better ways to find and hire and attract the developer who says, I'm not the kind of person who can put myself in that spot. So,
yeah. I'm just trying to respond on KRMPIS says that's why you have your elevator speech honed. What a good piece of advice, by the way, is like when you're in that opportunity, when you do get to meet somebody, you got to be ready to go. You got to just be able to like have that 30-second elevator pitch. And if you don't, what ends up happening is you're like, well, I guess I've been looking for some work and I'm kind of interested in some web, like whatever it is, right? And the more you have that, it's just another one of these little tools in our arsenals, like have the elevator pitch. And if you're not familiar with that, that's basically like a 30-second. If someone asked you what you're looking for and you're on the elevator and you're only between floors, and so you've only got 30 seconds or whatever to sort of say something before they get out and walk out of the elevator and you're there by yourself, that's what an elevator pitch is. And it's always good to be prepared to be able to say what it is you're looking for, what you bring to the table, right? Don't always just tell people what you're looking for. That doesn't help them. You want to tell them what you can do for them, what you bring to the table, right? And I think that's that's pretty good to be prepared for. So there's a question about certifications. Another question I was going to ask you guys, and you could tell me which one you want to take, is do we have stories from either the audience or from us about things that went bad in an interview? Like, well, here's something I tried that didn't work well, or we were interviewing people and they said something that was just not a good idea, things like that. We could share some of those things. I don't know. Do you guys? Go ahead, Rich.
I know one of the ones that happened a while ago, but it was one of those that was just body positioning. And you talked to passionate's kind of one thing, but just being enthusiastic about the role. I mean, the one position we were talking to someone and they kind of had arm their chin on their hand kind of as they were talking about it, and it just kind of gave the wrong totally the wrong impression for what you were what you were expecting, basically. So it sounds like a simple thing, but you'd be surprised how often some of those simple things are missed and overlooked and get picked up on by the interviewer.
Body language and just presence, right? Presence in the thing. I've had people come in. I don't know if it'll show right here, but people that come into the interview and they sort of like kick back on the chair and they're just sort of like chilling out and like get their hands back. Like I've seen people do this in interviews, and there's a time when that can be okay. Also, like I'm not trying to say that but that you have to impress me, so to speak, but I want to feel like you're taking this seriously, right? And that's what you're talking about your hand on your face or whatever it is. You want to show that you're engaged and you're here to win, right? That you're here for a reason. These days have a virtual presence. Yeah, that's good. Oh, Twitch Read says eye contact. Yep, that's a good one. Wow, we're getting so many comments tonight. This is
a lot of great.
This is fun.
I think there's a lot of great feedback here and a lot of great questions. I mean, I've got so many of them queued up. We sort of started answering how, I think you answered in the chat, like how competitive is development. You rarely hear the term programmer. And I think part of that is because just how terrible we are in this industry with naming what it is we do. I mean, you'll hear everything from developer to engineer, which is if I can rant for just a second, computer programmers being called engineers is absolutely ridiculous, because an engineer, and I'm not trying to offend anybody, an engineer is somebody who goes and passes a certification exam given by usually their local government or state to prove that when they go wire something or build a bridge, that they know exactly how to do it. And boy, we don't know how to start doing anything in our industry, right? Like every time we go to build something, aren't we learning for the first time? Imagine if the civil engineer, first time I've worked on a bridge.
I never built a bridge.
Never really built a bridge.
Probably work out okay.
It should be all right. We might have a few bugs. We can fix them. We can fix them after we ship. So, and I'm not trying to belittle what we do, right? It's one of the hardest things humans do is coding correct programs. It's one of the most difficult things, but it is not a hard science the way civil engineering is. I'm going to pick on civil engineering again, or electrical engineering. I mean, you want to be an electrician, you pass a board exam so that you know what kind of gauge wire to put in the wall so that it doesn't burn the house down. We don't do that. We're not good at that. So my point, getting back to your question, is the terms are overloaded. Developer, programmer, coder, engineering, software engineering. They're these extremely overloaded terms. Despite talking about it being competitive, what I will say is there's a lot of demand. We need more developers. And I mean, it's still growing at a phenomenal pace. The demand for developers and information technology specialists and us, really, right? That's why we have the show.
Right. Hey, there's a comment here from, I guess it's like Smakes or something like Smakes. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, about at a boot camp where they did technical interviews and then later said, wish the process was practiced more and streamed in public to demystify it. Maybe we should do a show,
good idea,
actually about interviewing. Like here we're sort of dabbling around.
Yeah, what a good idea.
Yeah, maybe have some people call in. We've been talking about ways to have people call in, and we could actually ask people questions, or we could even just demonstrate amongst ourselves how to do interviews and really a more focused show on practical interviews. And I did see some comments in here as the comments are going by quickly, but about the virtual world. So I'm actually getting ready to start hiring a couple people. I don't want to get too slammed on that topic right now. People will be like sending me resumes. I haven't even said the specifics of what the role is yet. So let's not even go there. But it's going to be the first time that I've done a fully virtual hiring process without bringing someone in. Occasionally, I've dealt with candidates that were virtual when they were in other states, but most of the candidates were coming in locally. And I'm actually trying to think about how am I going to do things differently? How am I going to do things differently to support the candidates, right? So two aspects of it, right? I want to get the right candidate, but I also want to support the candidates so that they're in a position to show their best. And I don't know how I'm going to do that exactly. I'm going to wing it. Like Chris, like you said about software developers versus engineers, I'm just going to wing it. Yeah, onboarding is probably challenging too. That's a whole other topic, right? Mm-hmm. Have you guys done a lot of, Rich or Chris, have you guys done a lot of virtual interviews?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, yeah. And even before, before doing, before, everybody kind of being virtual in the pandemic, we were doing them just because, some of the positions and things that I've kind of helped out in interviews for were, around the U.S., or they might have people who were located outside the U.S. who would eventually come in. And yeah, so being interviewing virtually is something we've been doing a lot. Having the camera on, and being prepared, looking professional, just like you would if you were there in person, is all still things that you want to make sure you do when you start doing those virtual interviews. It's not, even though you're not in the same space, you still got to, project that same bit of professionalism as you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess part of that, here's an interesting question, and it relates to what you just said, but I saw something go back. Somebody commented about dressing appropriately for an interview. What does that mean for a virtual interview? Like, certainly we've gotten more casual these days. At least at my company, we're super casual. We wear, shorts and, flip-flops to work. But if I was interviewing for a job where I wore a suit, and I know people might laugh that I'm even saying that, but I guess, would I wear a suit to a virtual interview? I don't know. I guess I would. But so how should people dress for a virtual interview? How do you present yourself the way you're saying, Rich? Like to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it goes with the culture for the spot you're going in. I mean, sometimes it gets a little fuzzy, I think, in the computer in the programming world, just because we don't necessarily show up in suits and ties. But if you're consulting, that might be the attire you might want to go with instead of just looking professional, because you're going to be in front of customers a little differently. So I think it wouldn't hurt to overdress would be my, after netting all that out, would be my overall assessment.
They say you can't overdress, right? I've heard. Yep. That's a term. That's a phrase I've heard before. And a few people in the chat have just said the same thing: dress the part, shirt and tie. Interview last night, suit and tie.
There's some funny comments too. You got to wear pants, no onesies, right? Certainly good. Yeah. So I always feel weird when people even came into my office for job interviews, because we're like, again, it's t-shirts and shorts or whatever. But I thought when someone was coming in for an interview, I know they're going to dress nice, and I felt like, should I put on some different clothes, like as the interviewer? I don't know. I'd love to hear what people think about that. Like, if they put on a jacket and tie, or dress nice, do they feel offended that they came in to meet me and I'm there in I usually would wear a golf shirt on an interview day or something like. But was that enough? Was I disrespectful to them?
I think having a suit jacket in the office wouldn't, for those kind of things, is what I would typically do, right? So, you're going to do an interview, you throw the jacket on real quick, and you're able to, at least, hopefully be on par, potentially, maybe even, you might be a little underdressed, but you're the one in the position who's doing the interviewing too.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of times though, I think candidates are happy when they see you come in like, oh, they're casual. This is good. But I think, I mean, got to try to step it up a little bit. I would count that as respectful if you were in khakis and a polo. Yeah. Net Frazier, thanks for the comment.
I think it might be also kind of one of those icebreaker things too, right? Use it as probably the last time you have to wear a suit.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. There are show ideas, because we're coming up on a couple hours here. We've actually gone a little longer than we usually do, but that's because we've got some the feedback is so great tonight. And thank you all for being here live, whether you're on Twitch or YouTube, and just, answering on common interview questions and how you would answer them would be great. I mean, what a great show idea. Right? What a great show idea is we go and get some of these common interview questions. What else have I seen?
Don't ride your bike and show up in spandex. Thanks, Mike Shea, for that. That's another good tip.
Mike.
Common interview questions is a great topic.
Mike Shea did ask about certifications. I know I'm not sure we really even talked about it at all. Or, what was another one that I saw here that was pretty good? We're getting the age-old starting question, like, what's a great language to start with, And there's just, there's a lot of good stuff here. So I really do appreciate that everybody has come in here. I don't know that we'll get to all these topics. Certainly not tonight, right? But I do think that if you stick around and follow us on Twitter at the Dev Talk Show, I'll make sure that I put up the link to the meetup, because the meetup is where we post our future schedule. And, sometimes we talk like this, and next week, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. Next week, we're going to do some game development that runs on an Xbox. So we'll probably be looking at some code, right?
It's a diverse show. We do all kinds of stuff, right? Whatever. It's the Dev Talk Show. What's interesting to developers? What's the topic? It doesn't matter. If it's interesting to developers, we're going to talk about it. We're going to demonstrate code. We have guests and all these things. So please, if you're here with us now, subscribe, follow us, and you'll get notified when we're going live. Or if you don't like that, you could turn that off too. Some people hate that stuff. And some people are heading out now. I can see Twitch Reed's got to go, but good luck with the interview.
Definitely. Good luck with that.
They will be wearing a suit for. Sorry.
Right.
Yep.
So don't hesitate.
Stuff.
Those of you that have stuck around, I mean, look, just thanks to Cyber and Security for that raid. We had a lot of folks who come and got to check us out. And don't forget to hit that follow button so as right now we're live 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time on Wednesdays. So first job First job, right? And I think that was the topic, getting the first job. How did we get ours? I respect the fact that getting my first job as long ago as it was isn't as relevant as today. I fully respect that. But there are still some lessons, I think, to be learned, because like then and now, you've got somebody here who did not go and get a CS degree. And as we said at the very beginning, at the top of the show, when Ross the Lip pointed out the imposter syndrome, the Imposter's Handbook, which is a book by Rob Connery about all those computer science principles that you may have missed if you didn't get a computer science degree, or heck, maybe you did get the computer science degree and you've forgotten them, right? So that's a fantastic resource. I've probably only gotten through about half of it because of my terrible habit of starting books and not finishing them. I think that is a fantastic place to start. But then just talking about how, what was your first job like and what did you do? I hope what people get out of this is I told you all that I started by writing some BASIC, right? And then we moved into some C and MFC because it was the right thing to do for that business. And then I found myself doing, VB6 and C++. And then that turned into some web development. So if there's a lesson to be learned here, is your skills are going to grow in this job, and you're not going to do just one thing. That the industry's changing. Like today, we're all learning cloud-based skills and cloud architecture. Keeping up is huge, right? So that's what we're here for. We're here to keep up. So yeah, is there a VOD of this? Yes, all of our shows are recorded, and they're on youtube.com/thedevtalkshow. In fact, we're live there right now. And when this show ends on youtube.com/thedevtalkshow, the show's going to be there. The show will be there. And then what we do is, because you'll see that it's a stream, so you're going to have to zoom forward a little bit to find the stream starting, but we trim the shows. It takes about 24 hours for YouTube to give us that capability. At least that's what I found. So if there's YouTube pros here that are like, Chris, you got it totally wrong, then I apologize. But I found last week, it took about 24 hours before I could get in and trim it. And then we trim it into a nice episode so you don't have to sit through the stream starting. But yeah, definitely, sub to that channel. We've got a lot of great content there.
Sub there. That's
next
awesome.
Next week, we're going to talk about some game development with Xbox. I think it'll be fun. If you're a web developer, you will see that if with your retail Xbox One and entirely free software, if you're a web developer, you can write a game that'll use the controller on Xbox One. You can even do some basic networking. I've done it. It's fun stuff. So
I'm looking forward to that. That should be fun.
Yeah.
We got another question here from Richard Wysocki. Do you guys want to do that quickly, or are you guys?
Yeah, we'll take it and then I mean, gosh, boy, isn't it great to look at all these? So
I think we need
please
to do
come
a
back
raid
next
after this
week.
Too, by the way.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I feel like we gotta pay that forward.
We gotta
so
pass
we're to
the
figure out
love
who to
along.
raid
So
next.
let's take this one and then maybe we're good. What a great show. So, like you said, Richard Wysocki said, you guys are smart and bright. Thank you. Appreciate that. A little kind. Have you seen others that couldn't keep up and fade out? What options do you suggest for them? Asking again since you brought it up. I have, actually. Boy, I don't want to end on kind of a downer note. I do know of some good friends that when a major shift happened, they weren't prepared, didn't prepare themselves, and in some cases didn't want to. And there could be good reasons for that. You could get burned out. You could get burned out of constant upkeep, which is unfortunate in our industry. There's a whole show coming, I think, on the disservice we do to our developers by asking them to keep up on their own. I could rant about that versus providing them the training they need, right? But
you did say you wanted to talk about that. Yeah, you mentioned that one before,
I've mentioned
right?
that a few times. So I don't want to tell you there's a crystal ball, because the landscape is littered with technologies that maybe each of us might have jumped on and then they faded out on us. that can be soul crushing. But I do know of some folks who I can think back to the beginning of the .NET platform, frankly, where at VB6, just brilliant, excellent, expert. He said he didn't want to transition again. I don't want to learn again. I've done it enough. And he switched into doing other stuff, kind of got into sort of project management. So still could use his tech brain. And then eventually just, kept on moving a little bit further and further by maybe project management for something that's not tech. And that was it, right? Next thing you know, don't write code anymore.
Yeah, but fade out doesn't have to be, I mean, it depends on how you're interpreting the question.
Sure.
I don't necessarily see that as super negative. I know there were people that were on like what I would call the fast track, people that were like, wow, these people are real, rock stars, which we love that phrase, right? Rock stars, and they're doing so great. And they eventually got to a point where they said, you know what? I've been pushing and learning and doing this and doing that. And I think I've reached my point where I'm like, I'm going to ride it out for a while now, right? And that's not necessarily wrong, right? I mean, sometimes you have to come up with the balance that works for you, and take a break, or even if you plan to come back and get more involved in things like that. But so you need to take a break. You need to do what's right for you. That's what I really wanted to say, is that, if you can't keep up and you don't want to keep up, that's fine too. Not everybody has to just keep chasing the new technology. It's kind of hard, especially when I see comments about people talking about how, you have to learn on your own free time after work and things like that. It gets tiring. You have kids, you have a personal life. God forbid you have a personal life,
Yep.
So I think you just got to do what's right for you, and what makes you happy, and and what works for you. But everybody's different, right?
Yep. I agree. So great questions. There's another one that I think we should get to another time about working in QA and partnering with devs, and why is it that requirements, is there such a gap to understanding them from a dev perspective? Like, wow, is that a show?
That's a whole show.
That's like a whole series. That's a whole podcast. Like the whole.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a different channel. That's a whole channel.
But a great question, and we should take a look at that. So, what do you think? Are we ready till next Wednesday here?
Oh man, this was a blast.
This was great.
We've been going for about 2 hours, and it's probably time to throw in the towel. So, everybody here has been great. So, I can't help but say again, hey, subscribe, follow. We love you guys. And really, like the amount of comments. Now, something we should also say real quick as we're closing up here. There are also people here that are not commenting, and that's great too.
Yeah, thanks.
We are. No, we're not, down on the people that are just hanging out and listening to the show. Of course, we're happy to have you here. And so what do we want to do? Do we want to do a raid?
Yeah, I think so. So what we normally do is we are going to cycle out, and you're going to see an ending that way when we trim on YouTube, it'll be a good proper ending. And then we'll come back here and we'll raid, and that'll do it, right?
Who we gonna raid, guys? We got to figure that out real quick, right?
Yeah.
Or do we figure that out afterwards?
You got to kind of figure it out now.
We'll talk. We'll talk while we are playing the outro.
Yeah.
So you want to take us out here?
Yeah. Well, listen. Thanks so much for being with us. It's Wednesday, and it's the Dev Talk Show. We are here Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope you'll join us. We hope we'll see you next week. We appreciate your time, and we thank you for being with us. And, Rich, Chris, and myself, we're the hosts. We're here every week, and we're working hard to bring the content for you. And we appreciate you being with us. So hopefully we'll see you next week on the Dev Talk Show.
got your W-2s, just a few more
Who's that?
questions.
That's Dave, a free TurboTax live tax expert.
Why do you need a tax expert?
I've always done those for you.
My taxes are different since I moved out. Besides, Dave's advice is free, and I can file for free.
Hey, Dave, if my son still eats my food, does that make him a dependent?
No.
File a simple return for free, now with advice from a TurboTax live expert.
Octave and practice some trajectories.
All right, so here we go. We're going to raid Danny Stem, who is whiteboarding about, it looks like, working on Vanessa, which actually I'm not sure what it's about. But
All right, let's do it.
so here we go, setting the raid target. Thank you all for being here. Please support the next streamer that we're going to, and support Science and Technology on Twitch. Thank you all very much. Let's see if I get this right. Oh, it says that I couldn't start it. Why?
Uh-oh.
Hold on. Working on it. See, as you can see, we're new to raiding.
Yeah,
We usually don't have enough. We usually don't have enough people to raid, right? There it goes. It's starting.
All right, here we go. So
All right.
mod view, does that have to?
I don't think so. But hey, have a great night. We will see ya. Have a good one.
No, it switched over.